Hi, my name is Jamal Ashraf, and I'm going to be talking about Java concept or Big Java as another name for this by Kay Horstman. And we are working on the chapter 6. This is for the loops. So I broke it down to the smaller pieces. In each part, I'm going to focus on that section, and then we do some hands-on practices to be sure that we understand the topic, to have a pen and pencil, have a pen and paper ready, or have something to write on so we can practice this, and you can pause it at any time to think about it, and maybe you can go back and look at some of the things that was not clear to you or can bring your questions to the class and we can talk about it either in the DQ or in person. All right, so the first part that I want to talk about is a while loop. So I'm going to start with while loop. So generally what we're talking about the loop is there is some condition, we check that condition, and as far as the condition is correct, we're just going to be doing the same thing. So as far as I'm not passing the class, I have to retake the class again. So I have to keep taking it till I pass the class. We're going to use this for input validation. We're going to wait and ask the user for certain input. And if the user, we talked about this in the last chapter, if the user didn't put the correct input or it's out of range, then we're going to ask the user to enter again. So we're going to stay in this loop till we get the correct data that we need before we start processing on inside our program. So one of the examples that your book has is talking about the investment problem. So the idea is we're going to be investing $10,000 with the interest rate of 5%. And how many years does it take to, let me get this going here. So the question, if we have a 5% interest rate, the initial rate is 10,000, and we are checking to see how many years does it take for my money to be double, okay? We are practicing on these things to understand the loops. So the idea is what? The idea is we're going to keep adding interest every year till we get to double of and move this out of the way. Okay, so when we're working with the loop, we have three things that we want to keep eye on it. First is set, then check, then change. And that means we have to set something before we get into the loop. And then when we want to get into the loop, we're going to check it to see if the condition is correct. Then we go inside, and then we're going to stay there till the condition changes. But the condition only changes if we do the change inside the loop. If the change doesn't happen inside the loop, it's just going to stay there forever. So we are going to start with the value of 10,000. That's going to be my set. So in year 0, my balance is going to be 10,000. Then we're going to add 1 to the year. We're going to calculate the balance. And then we're going to add that new balance, or we're going to add interest to our balance. So we're going to keep doing this till the condition, which is our initial balance was 10,000, is going to change to 20,000, and then we're going to stop and we're going to report how many years we have. So we're going to do some hand tracing, and we're going to talk about the hand tracing to understand it and be sure that we are going in the right direction. So after the first year, my year is going to be 1. My interest is 500. That's 5% of 10,000. And then we're going to add this 500 to our 10,000. Now our balance is 10,500. That means the second year, our interest of 5% is going to apply to 10,500. And we're going to keep doing this till we get to 20,000 or more than 20,000. So the condition is it has to be 20,000 or more. That's going to be our double. So this is going to be my set, and this is going to be my check, and this is where we're going to be changing. So I'm going to be talking about this set, check, change throughout this chapter, and something that we need to follow. All right, so your book is talking about the particle accelerator, that the subatomic particles traverse a loop-shaped tunnel, and they're going to gain the speed required for a physical experiment. So in the computer science, we have a statement that's going to stay in the loop, and it's going to execute till the while condition changes. So let's look at the code and see how we're going to do. So we're going to have a while, and it's going to have a condition, and we're going to check this condition. As far as this condition is true, or it can be statements, and as far as the parentheses is going to end up to be true, then we're going to execute these statements. As soon as this condition is false, then we're going to get out of the braces. So we're going to stay here as long as this condition is true. So we're talking about set, check, and change. That means this condition has to be set before the while loop. And when we get to the while loop, we're going to check it. If it's not true, we are not even going to go inside. We're only going to go inside if the condition is true, and then we're going to stay here till we stop. So a student needs this course. While the student needs this course, has to do this course. Or while a student is not passing this class, has to do this course. Or while students is in the class, has to do reading and hands-on problems, solve problems. So doing the homework for this one. You're going to keep doing the homework for this class while you are in this class. So when you are done with the class, you're not going to do the homework for this class. Okay, so we're going to set the balance to 10,000. That would be my set. We have the target balance to 20,000. So we need this before we get to our while. That's my set. That's initial values. So when we get to the while, we're going to check this. So as far as my balance is less than my target balance, which is 20,000, I'm going to do this. So first thing I want to do is I want to add a year. I'm going to calculate the interest, and I'm going to add the interest to my balance. I'm going to keep doing this till my balance is not less than the target balance anymore. So as soon as we get to 20,000 or more, we're going to stop. So we gotta keep eye on this, because if, first of all, if this condition is not true, we're not going to start doing this. And that's the while structure. So if I say my initial balance is 30,000 and my target balance is 20,000, it doesn't even go inside here. That's my set. And that's the check that we're going to do before we do anything. Now, the key point is we're going to be changing this one. So in this case, I'm changing the balance. I'm going to keep changing the balance till this condition changes. Now, if I don't change my balance, or my balance is not growing the way that I'm hoping, instead of growing, it's going to go down, I am going to stay in this loop forever. So we talked about the flowchart in the last chapter, and this is a flowchart for this. We're going to have a condition, and if this condition is false, we're going to get out. If the condition is true, we're going to do the statements inside the block of code. All right, let's go through the details of this for the while statement. Again, we're talking about set, check, and change. So somewhere this condition that we have here has to be set. So that's going to be my set over there, that the variable has to be set before we get to the while loop. It has to have some values. It doesn't have to be 0. It can start with, I don't know, my balance can be 500, 10,000, whatever it is, or it can be a 0. But remember, if my balance is 0, then balance times rate divided by 100 is going to give me 0. So it's going to stay here. It's not going to change. So if my balance is 0, and I'm going to start with this one, and I don't have no money, and I want to make $20,000 in so many years, it's not going to go anywhere. So my balance has to have some value somewhere. So we're going to be checking the condition, and now we have to update our condition. If I don't update this condition, this is important, and we're going to do it at the end of our statements. We can update it anywhere, but the problem with that is as soon as we update, we want to go back and check it. If I, by mistake, put this update somewhere else, even though I update it, it's not going to check it till it does some statements. So you might have some extra calculation that you don't need. So my balance is already 20,000, but I'm calculating interest again. If I don't put it right here, and I put it, so if I move this one instead of here, if I move it over here, even though my balance is 20,000 or more, I'm still calculating the interest and adding it to the balance. So I have to be sure that the condition that I'm updating is, I mean, you don't have to, but that's a convention that you're going to put it at the end of these statements. So we're going to pay attention to this, that if you create any kind of variable, meaning that if you declare any variable inside the loop, the variable is going to be created every time that you go through the loop. So this interest is going to be created in the memory, And when you're done with that iteration, it's going to go away and it's going to create it again. So if this happened for 20 times, this variable has been created 20 times and it's deleted 20 times. So that's what's happening with this variable. And we talked about it as a local variable, meaning that this variable is not going to affect the same variable name if it's outside of this loop. So if I had the same name interest somewhere else, this interest is not going to affect the other one. So, and also this interest is not available after this bracket. Just like what we did with if statements and block of codes. So if I have variable that's declared here, it's just going to be inside of here. The key here is every time you go through this, this is going to be created. So the convention of this book and some industry standards is that we're going to put the braces, even though it's one statement. That way we can easily follow. I personally, if I have only one statement, I do not put braces, but there are some industry in that standard that they are asking to put that braces, even if it's one statement. So there is something called off by one. So if we start and somewhere, we're going to be talking about counting or things in that matter, and then our target or the operator are not done correctly, we could be off by one. So we talk about, we always start with 0 and we're going to stop before something. So if I am going to be doing this 10 times, if I'm doing a loop 10 times, I'm going to start with 0. I'm going to stop my less than 10. So my count is going to be 0, and I'm going to stop at 9. 0 to 9 is going to give me 10. Now, if I start with 1 and I stop before 10, then I'm going to have one less number. If I start with 0 and I say less than or equal 10, then I'm going to have 11 numbers. So those are off by one that we're going to be practicing, and we're going to be checking to be sure we're going to be okay with those. And as usual, when we're getting used to this language, we are putting semicolon all over the place. And sometimes by mistake, we're going to put a semicolon right here. And that's what's going to happen is that semicolon is going to end my loop. So my loop is not going to be this block anymore. My loop is going to be right here. And since we are not doing any update, this loop is going to be running forever. That means we have to stop it, stop the whole execution somehow. So be careful not to put a semicolon here. The biggest problem that we have with the while loop is infinite loop, meaning that you're going to go inside the loop, but you don't get out. So if I see a program running, it doesn't show anything, or it shows something again and again and again and again, then that means we have a while loop that's just a runaway one while loop that we have to go find it and fix it. So the statements that we have here, it's a block of code, is going to be executed every time we go through this loop till this condition changes. And this variable here is going to be created and deleted every iteration. And again, we're talking about the variable has been created. And again, the interest is no longer declared here, meaning that this interest is inside of this block and only exists here, and it's going to go away. So if I need this interest to be available after the loop, I have to declare it outside the loop. If I need this variable outside the loop, I have to define it outside the loop. If I put it inside, it's only going to, and one advantage of this is if I have another interest variable somewhere else, this is not going to affect that one. Okay, let's go through this example to see what's happening. We're just going to step through the while loop, and of course, we cannot go through the whole thing, just to get some kind of understanding what's happening. So we start with 10,000. So remember, we're talking about set, check, and change. So we started with 10,000. That's my set, and the year is 0. That's right before we get to while loop. So the balance here is 10,000. The target is 20,000, and that's where we start. Then we go to inside of it. We are calculating the balance. And then first we're going to add 1 to the year. So my year becomes 1. And then I'm going to calculate the interest. And then that my interest is 500. Then I'm going to add it to my balance. Now my balance is 10,500 after the first year. Then we go to we're going to check the condition. We're going to check the condition to see if my balance is less than target balance. Remember, target balance was 20,000. So 10,500 is less than this. So we're going to repeat this again. So we're going to add 1 to the year. We're going to calculate the interest, and we're going to add it. And if we keep doing this correctly, then eventually my balance is going to go higher than my target balance. So after 15 iteration over here, my balance is going to be more than 20,000. So when that happens, this while loop is going to stop, and then we're going to get out of it. And generally what we're going to do, we can print our year over here, and that's where we're going to get the 15 into. So the book has this example. Again, if you bought the book, you have the code for the book. You can go through it and play with it. And then we have a runner. As I said, that you can have minimum of 2 files. What are we doing? We're creating the class, and then we're going to have a tester to test the class. We're going to go over some of these things just to practice. So if I want to go from 1 to 10, I am going to have sum is 0. And as far as my sum is less than 10, I want to just add I to my sum. So my I is going to keep going up and up and up till my sum is 10. So the first time my I is 0 comes here, my sum is 0, sum is less than 10, my I becomes 1, that's right there, and then my sum becomes 1, 0 plus 1. And then we go back, my I becomes 2, sum becomes 3, I is 3, sum 6, I is 4, sum is 10, 10 is not less than 10, it's going to stop. So you might want to practice some of these things in your IDE. Now, let's look at this one. So here, what we have is we have the same structure. My sum is 0, I is 0. I am checking to see if sum is less than 10. But instead of adding I, I'm subtracting I. So instead of sum keep growing up, it's going down. So the sum starts with -1, then it goes negative, and it never ever gonna be, it's always gonna be less than 10. It's never gonna change this condition. So this loop is gonna go forever. These are the things that we have to be careful about, that we're gonna be sure that inside of our block of code, this condition, it's gonna change somewhere, somehow. So in this case, I'm checking for the sum less than 0. So my initial condition, my set, it's not the condition for the loop, so it's never going to go inside the loop. So my sum is less than 0. I'm checking for sum less than 0. It's never going to execute this block of code. How do I know? I'm going to put a print something inside the block of code, and that print is never going to be printed. What about this one? I have sum 0, and I'm checking the condition of sum greater than or equal 10. Again, this initial condition is not valid, so we're never going to go inside the while. This one, can you see what the problem is with this one? We are putting a semicolon over here by mistake. And because we're putting the semicolon here, my whole while loop is this one right there. So it's going to check the sum is less than 10, and then it's going to check the sum is less than 10. It's going to check the sum is less than 10. Because the sum is not updating, it's just going to keep doing this forever. So if you look at your screen, it just keeps going, scrolling, and nothing is happening. So take a look at these things, practice it, and if you have any questions, bring it to our class and we can talk about it. So that's what the infinite loop is, that you go inside the loop and the condition is never reached, so you never get to that false condition to get out of it. So if my condition in this area is always going to stay the same, this block is going to keep running and running and running. So some of the things that we're going to be seeing, of course, if I'm debugging, we're going to talk about debugging at the end of this chapter. If I have a print over here, it's going to keep going forever. I'm just going to do print, 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 and it's going to keep going. So we have to be careful that the update that we do is going to affect this condition. So if I have years greater than 0, and my year starts at 20 and it's going to keep going up, it's never going to change this condition. And, you know, especially if you start in the programming, these things happen and it's okay. And when you see it, it's just the key is when you see a runaway and it's going to keep going, first of all, you're going to know how to kill the program. Most of the IDE is going to give you that option to stop it. And then you have to check your condition versus your update to be sure they are in the sync and they are in the same level. So if I start my year with the 0, or if I start my year with 1, then it's going to make a difference. If I put less than, or if I put less than or equal, it's going to make a difference. So how do we do this? Remember, we talked about the test cases. So we're going to create some kind of a test to be sure that this is not happening. So I'm going to change the 5% interest to 50%. So if I do 50%, it should, in 2 years or so, I have to double it. So the first year balance is 150, the second year balance is over 200. Now we're checking these to be sure that our year that we're going to be printing is going to be 2. So if my year is 1 or my year is 3, then something is, we have to change something. If I change my rate to 100%, my year should be 1. So those are the test cases we're going to do to be sure it's correct. And then less than or equal, it's going to make a difference, especially if you're doing some kind of a counter or something that's just going up. So if I want to know what is going to be my balance in 20 years. So a rule of thumb for us not to confuse these things, if I'm going through the year and I want to do 20 years, I generally what I do is we start with 0 and then we go less than the target that we have. So in this case would be a less than 20. So we start with 0 and then we go less than 20. Now, if I start with 1, I'm going to iterate 19 times. If I start with 0 and I go here less than or equal 20, I'm going to go 21 times. So we start with 0, we stop less than the target one. That's going to give me 0 to 19, which is going to give me 20. So we're going to go over these self-checks. I want you to pause it and write down the answer, think about it. You might want to go back and look at some stuff so you can rewind it and go back. If you answer it and you're happy with your answer, that's good. I strongly suggest you compare your notes, your answers with somebody else in the class to be sure that you have what you want. We're going to try to go over some of these things in class. And of course, as usual, you have questions, you can always come to the class, post it on DQ, and we can talk about it. So the first one is, how many years does it take for the investment to triple? So we're going to modify the program, and instead of doing it double, we're going to do a triple. So if I have my target, my balance, whatever it is, I'm going to set it. And then my target is going to be balance times 3. So what about if the interest rate is 10% per year? How many years does it take for the investment to double? So let's modify the program and run it. So potentially you can either take the code and run it again, or you can have it in front of you and look at the lines that you want to modify and put it on the paper of what you think should happen. So we can also put a print statement inside our block so we can see every year what is the changes. So if we change the less than to less than or equal, what's going to happen to the program? And this is something that we got to be cautious about it, and we got to think about it. My way of doing it is just find my own convention and stay with that. So I start with 1 less, and then I'm going to go less than. So I barely ever use less than or equal. I always use less than. And if that's your thing, you're less than or equal, then you got to be sure that your starting point is different. So another one over here, we are starting with n to 1. We are checking to see if n is less than 100. We're multiplying by 2 every time, and we're going to print it. So what do you think is going to come out of this? All right, I'm going to stop right here, and then we can go to the next